On July 31st of this year, Acumera, known for their secure edge connectivity, visibility, and computing solutions, announced it was acquiring Scale Computing. This was pretty big news in the world of enterprise virtualization, especially in the wake of Broadcom's acquisition of VMware and the ensuing changes they made. A bit over a year ago, I had a great conversation with Jeff Reddy, then CEO of Scale Computing, around the future of virtualization post-Broadcom. I wanted to catch up with Jeff, now President and Chief Marketing Officer of the newly combined company, now also known as Scale Computing, post-acquisition, to talk about what the changes mean for Scale, Acumera, and the future of Scale Computing.
This video is sponsored by Brilliant. You know, one of the best parts of running a home lab is the constant problem solving. Nothing works perfectly the first time, and that is half the fun. And that's why I'm excited to have Brilliant as today's sponsor. Brilliant helps you become a better thinker and problem solver with thousands of visual, interactive lessons in math, science, programming, data analysis, and AI. What I love is that Brilliant is all about learning by doing. Instead of sitting through another dry lecture, you're in there hands-on, experimenting, solving puzzles, and seeing how the concepts play out in real time. It's way more engaging and honestly a lot closer to how we all learn when we're tinkering in our home labs. Here's an example from one of their programming courses. You're not just reading code, you're actually working through problems that build your intuition step by step. Same goes for their math and data courses. It's interactive, it's visual, and it sticks. So, if you want to level up your problem-solving skills, you can start learning on Brilliant for free. Just head over to brilliant.org/2guystech, scan the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description. And Brilliant's giving 2GuysTech viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, so you can unlock unlimited access to all of their courses. Now back to the video.
And now I'd like to bring Jeff Reddy, who is now the President and Chief Marketing Officer of the new Scale Computing on. Let's get him on stage here. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me again a little over a year later.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Rich. Glad to be back.
It has been, I'm guessing for you, it has been a wild, wild time. And so, I've obviously got some questions to ask you about the new Scale Computing, what that means for your customers, existing and future customers, and you as well. But before we get to that stuff, I just want to kind of ask you some general the pulse of the world in terms of the business, right? So, like I did the first time we hung out a little over a year ago, I asked you then, and I'll ask you now, what do you think the state of enterprise virtualization is now? What's been good and what's been bad?
Well, I suppose what a difference a year makes, and we could have said that a year ago too. The changes that keep happening with Broadcom VMware are seemingly unending, which is okay by me because it helps my business. But it has certainly been an ongoing change. I mean, even now we're coming up here a week and change away from discontinuing support for version 7 of VMware, and it's affected everything. It's affected end customers, of course, and many people in your audience. It's affected the MSPs and the resellers and the channel partners who serve those customers. Many of them have been just outright kicked out of the program. Like they can't even sell VMware anymore. And all that's been good for us, but it's just been chaotic. I can't tell you how many stories I have heard from customers who come to us almost in a panic. Right. I mean, even literally this morning, I had a customer, a prospect. They've been testing. Right. So this is a customer who's been testing the product for some time. They thought they had a year, which they technically do. They had a year on their renewal for VMware. And only this morning, so I was top of mind, realized that their version 7 was no longer supported in 10 days. They hadn't caught that. And so they were just kind of operating on, we're going to review our options. We're going to see it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we need to do something. What happens if, we have a major crisis in November? Right. So there's been a lot of that. I think that it just brings everything back into focus. Who is Broadcom targeting now with the VMware product? And the answer is very large global enterprise. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Unless you're not very large global enterprise. And then you think, oh, that isn't me. So,
Right.
so the business model works for them, and I'm sure the product will continue to work for that group. But for everybody else, there's been a lot of looking for new options. So
yeah, I say this all the time, but it's, if there's a silver lining, it's that all of a sudden the world has opened up and companies like Scale can now get their time in the sun with the products that, HyperCore is a fantastic product, right? So just be able to like get some breathing room, be able to show what you can do. That's a big deal. So I feel like the world is calming down. We're in that stage of grief where we've now accepted the world as it is, and now people are like, okay, now we're going to go out and we're actually going to try other possible virtualization platforms, ones that they wouldn't even have given a chance to, or wouldn't even have known it existed. So I think that's there's a silver lining to everything, I suppose, right? I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and there's been a lot of innovation in virtualization over the last 10 years that if you were purely looking at VMware, because you didn't think you needed to look anywhere else, you just weren't aware of. Right? You didn't know these things were out there, or maybe some of it you might have been cursory aware of, but not kind of fully in depth. And there's a lot of options out there, and I think it's an exciting spot to be. I would imagine, 15 years ago, which I had been doing, pitching like, hey, we should start up a VMware alternative. People thought, well, why would anyone ever need that? And I wasn't the only one who did that, right? But it's one of the things. And now it's like, oh, well, there are some cool things out there, and they run a gamut. I mean, I wouldn't make the claim that scale computing is a fit for every customer. We have a sweet spot. We have customers who exist outside of that sweet spot, but there's other vendors and other products that fit different things, and that's that's totally fine. That's a good spot to be. So,
yeah, I mean, having a niche means that you can better serve those people too, right? If you try to do the hit everything for everybody sort of situation, then it's like being like the jack of all trades but master of none, right? In that regard. So,
yeah, and right now, many customers kind of feel betrayed, I think might be the right word, and it's. Again, I mean, business is business, and these things happen. But it was just an area that for so long, if you were an IT admin, you didn't think much about, right? You just sort of took for granted that you were using this product, it was going to be there, and all of a sudden everything changes, and it caught everybody a bit with their pants down, so to speak. So so there's difference, and I think that one of the things that we try to bring from our perspective, and this is the advantage of having your relative niche, is that we really, if you are a mid-sized organization, you have, call it 2 to 15 people in the IT organization. You work for a company that's a couple hundred employees to a couple thousand employees. I have seen your situation literally thousands of times, right? Like that is the scale computing sweet spot. Now, if you're, again, that global 50 company and you're thinking, well, Broadcom is making the product for me, they are. Like, go for it, right? But knowing that we've seen the situation, and I think it just helps build some trust, right? And again, there's others. I mean, you can look at products like Proxmox, right? Obviously, pops up. There's nothing wrong with it, right? I mean, it's a totally viable for the right use case. Products like Nutanix at another end, sort of typically would be larger enterprise than where scale computing fits, but they're not, we're not perfectly separate, right? There's some overlap there. I've seen customers using or considering using, various flavors of roll your own KVM, which everybody at some extent even VMware is based off of KVM to some extent. Right. So, so that's ultimately, but I've seen, OpenShift or something, right? Like, we're going to run OpenShift. I mean, maybe that's a little bit more, you got to be able to build your own car than buy a Honda Civic if you're going to do that. But if you're capable of doing it, fine, right? Like, that's the thing. I see some of the MSPs and things maybe kind of rolling their own OpenShift deployment as an alternative. And in some cases, I've seen actually quite a few customers embrace multiple options for different parts. Maybe partly they might be a little gun shy. They don't want to put all their eggs in one basket because they did get burned this time around. But in other cases, slightly different. As we talked about last time, one of the areas that Scale has a lot of success in is edge computing. And so you might be a very large enterprise and you could run you still run VMware in the data center. You might run Nutanix in that environment, and then you could run Scale out at the edge. If you didn't want to run Scale, maybe you could run Scale to data center too. I'm not going to say you can't do that, but the edge is a spot where we're particularly strong, and I see customers doing multiple things at one time, right? And that again is also okay. There's a lot more compatibility than maybe the old VM world would have you believe. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's double down on that. So I'm assuming I know the answer to this, but I just want to ask from you, how's Scale's growth been then over the year? What sectors have you had the greatest success in?
It's been an enormous year of growth, and that's not going to be a surprise to you or anybody else. The last 2 years, really, ever since even we were nearing completion of the Broadcom VMware acquisition. We saw a huge increase in demand. We're at record levels effectively every time period, right? I mean, every week, every month, every quarter, it's bigger than the last one. So that's exciting. Again, I would say, for HyperCore, which is our virtualization platform, there's really two main segments. One I already talked a bit about, which is sort of classic mid-size, mid-market IT. That's sometimes it's one IT person, sometimes it's an MSP who serves a lot of small customers, like that. That's totally viable. Or it's a 500,000, 2,000 person organization that maybe they have a few locations or whatever. That's a classic Scale computing sweet spot and always has been. I've as founder of Scale, I openly embraced that customer segment. We built the product really for that customer segment. I've told the story before, but I grew up in an environment where my dad was what we would now call, director of IT. It was information systems back then, because we were talking sort of mainframes and ultimately, IBM AS400s by the time he was retiring. But, I grew up in that environment, and he worked for a construction company with, 1,000 employees and 200 office workers and, 2-3 people in IT. Right. So I saw that. And so when we built Scale, we wanted to build the virtualization platform that was effectively going to recreate. It's what I think the AS400 should have become had it not been effectively abandoned by IBM. Mm-hmm. But very resilient. You could hit a thing with a hammer, it would keep working, and that was the idea. And then backed up by world-class support and service, which was sort of the IBM brand of the day, right? Like, okay, you could always trust IBM, and that's what we try to build at Scale. So we're always a good fit there. The other side is this new world of edge computing, which is it's a little bit of a loaded term because marketing runs off with these things. But we're really talking about away from the data center, probably away from IT resources generally, autonomously running. So we've done a lot in retail, ranging from grocery stores to big box retail to gas stations, right? You think of a gas station, there's hardly any staff there, right? Much less is there IT there, but they're taking credit cards. They've got 24/7 video surveillance. They've got the little commercials that play at the fuel pumps. There's a lot of data, right? There's a lot of data there, and it needs to be highly available without that kind of headache. And then we do a lot in manufacturing. That's the other area that we see a lot of edge computing, and it could be factory floor. You've got robots doing stuff, and you're processing data. It could be in the related area, transportation, trucks and ships. you can imagine a ship at sea is a 24/7 operation without IT staff on board. So, those kinds of environments we see, and there's, it's cool. I really personally enjoy it because, when you have this kind of broad set of customers, you see such cool, interesting use cases, right? It's not like we only do, one thing. I also find personally rewarding that when you deal with that classic mid-size IT, that I get to feel like I'm actually really helping the people more. If it's big enterprise, I got 500 guys in the IT department. It's hard to say how many people you're really helping, but if you know all 5 people who are in IT, like you kind of feel like you're giving them a favor, right? So so that part of it's cool.
I dig that. I think that's that sort of like relationship is becoming a rarity, right? Especially because that was similar to what a lot of people had with old VMware, right? They had relationships with people. Yeah. They knew who their SEs were. They had these connections with them. Obviously, all that's gone. So the fact that you recognize and lean in on that is that's really all we have left these days, is the relationships and the connections you make with your vendors, because it's a mutual success thing that I think that some companies may have seemed to have forgotten.
Yeah, with the move to so much stuff going cloud, and I mean, big public cloud, and there's only a handful of those vendors. I mean, the odds that you have a personal relationship with an engineer at AWS is pretty slim, right? And if you do, is that person going to stay there for more than 2 or 3 years? I mean, it's just not the same thing. And I think VMware, being, a business which historically had been a lot, companies of all sizes, lots of mid-market, lots of channel partners and resellers and so forth, working through that. And you build that kind of relationship. And now, Broadcom has openly stated, well, they want to be they want to be what they call the 4th cloud vendor, right? So you have AWS, Microsoft, Google, and they want to be Broadcom. Well, I mean, there's your answer, right? Like, okay, you're going to have that kind of a relationship. But with one of the things that I've seen happening because of the chaos caused by Broadcom VMware is there is an opportunity that people are moving applications kind of back on-prem. So on one hand, we're going to, one way to deal with the VMware fallout is, forget on-prem virtualization. We're going all cloud. All right. And there are some people who do that. But, I'd already seen there was kind of a little bit of an undercurrent where people are realizing, certain applications actually run better or cheaper on-prem than in the cloud. So they'd started that migration. And now it's like, we're basically we're re-architecting anyway. Right. So now it's like, you're going to run some stuff in the cloud, sure, but we're going to move other applications back on site. And edge computing is a natural component of that, where you're going to say, we're going to run, like I said, the gas station needs to run, everything, even when it gets disconnected from the internet, which may happen more than anyone would like to admit, right? So you need those kinds of things. So it's a interesting world, but those personal relationships. I mean, they're appealing to me as an individual and as a founder, right? Like that's the kind of stuff I like to get into. It's more fun than thinking about spreadsheets and macro. So
the bureaucracy of it. Well, let's change gears a little bit here, because let's get to the meat of why I really wanted to talk with you, and that is the Scale acquisition by Acumera. And I'd like to know what that means. Well, I mean, there's obviously, we could take this a lot of different ways, but I think I want to start with, what does that mean for the Scale computing that I met a year ago?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say, when the acquisition was announced, one of the very first things I had to do was sort of reassure our existing customers that this was not Broadcom VMware, right?
Yeah.
The thing to note is that Acumera and legacy Scale computing were about the same size in terms of organization. So it was a combination of companies of roughly the same size. Acumera was backed by and is backed by a private equity fund called Oak Tree Capital. They're one of the largest private equity funds in the world. And so this acquisition funded by Oak Tree was really again, to make a combination of the two companies, and ultimately really to try and, you touched on this earlier, to try and build what VMware was before, kind of what I call the good VMware, right? Mm-hmm. With a focus on those customers, and to lean into both that VMware alternative space as well as the edge computing space. So Acumera was, they have two main product lines. One is managed networking and security. So that's something that we did not have at legacy scale at all. And the other is that they had a product called Reliant, which is on the edge computing side, but actually fits a different segment than where scale computing historically fit. Now, the combination of the two companies, we did take the scale computing name as the go-forward business. So we are still scale computing. The difference is the logo is now blue instead of red. But other than that, it's scale computing. Yeah. So that was the old Acumera colors with the scale computing name. And the lean in here is you take the HyperCore as our legacy virtualization product, did not have a lot of networking capabilities built in. Had some, right? You could do VLANs and those kinds of things, but it didn't have integrated security, firewall, that kind of stuff. And now we're taking a product it's called AccuVigil. That was the Acumera security product. You can run it independently. So if you're a gas station and you don't need compute, but you only needed managed networking, fine, right? So think of it as a kind of maybe an edge specific version of Fortinet or Palo Alto Networks or something like that, right? That's kind of where these guys fit. So we had lots of customers where they would be running AccuVigil as the network, and then they would deploy scale computing HyperCore as the virtualization stack. But one of the benefits here, this is just virtualization in general, is we can now run that entire security stack as a VM on top of HyperCore. And so now you can deploy one device that's the whole thing. And then, again, this is like when, VMware had their, various made acquisitions and they had different products, and this kind of fits into that mold. On the other hand, the Reliant platform, its strength is, well, one, it's not a virtualization platform. It's a containerization platform. So you could run containers on HyperCore. That's fine. And you can run VMs on the Reliant platform, but it's really a container first platform. And it's designed for orchestration at massive scale. So, flagship customers would be like Taco Bell, right? So there's 7,000 Taco Bell restaurants. You need to deliver a consistent experience across all of those things. And, if you're on the IT side, you can imagine the headache of, we need to make a configuration change and I've got to ensure that it propagates out 7,000 times, right? That's a big problem. And that's what they do. And so where, I would say the HyperCore product fits from, one man shop to, maybe a couple thousand locations. If you're pushing 7, 10, 20,000 locations, the Reliant stuff kind of fits in. So really the combination gives us a span from, virtualization, containerization, small to very, very large, and converging kind of the networking and the compute side together. So that's kind of the motivation behind the whole thing. Again, different products fill different segments, but ultimately it sort of becomes one platform, and you can kind of enter the platform, from any of those spots.
I guess that leads me to my natural next question is going to be: do you see this as a full integration into HyperCore? So it's like one big platform, people license in what they need and not, but it's or are these separate components that are you bringing everything in as one big unified product line? Or is this still like your Acumera's got, or the new scale has Acumera's product line separate from the legacy scale's HyperCore products?
Yeah. So the roadmap is that it'll all be fully integrated.
Cool.
Like I said, right now already, I mean, we're only 45 days in, but already we have you can run the AccuVigil networking stack on top of HyperCore, and likewise on top of the Reliant platform. So the networking can be integrated. And then, longer term roadmap, we expect to be able to run the Reliant platform right on top of HyperCore as well. So you'll have sort of one, technically you'll have one underlying platform with everything integrated. Now, that said, customers don't have to start with the fully integrated platform.
Right.
The idea is going to be they can start with any one of those three products and then ultimately converge as they need to, because many customers don't need everything all at once. And some will never need everything. If you're 150 person organization, the odds that you need the orchestration that handles 20,000 sites is pretty slim, right? So that's fine, right? You never need to add the Reliant stuff. On the other hand, if you start with just networking and go into the compute side, which we see a lot of at the edge, it's at the edge relative to the data center. There's no greenfield opportunity in network security. Like everyone has a firewall, like by default, right? Mm-hmm. Not everybody has edge compute. And so we find a lot of customers where they have the firewall first, they need the security first out at that gas station. And then they're going to add the compute because now they want to run AI, right? Or something at the gas station. So they're going to put the compute stuff in. So that becomes a natural fit. On the traditional sort of mid-market, hey, we're going to replace VMware with scale computing HyperCore space, the capability we have with the firewall and security is almost would you like fries with that, right? You're going to need a firewall. Do you want the integrated firewall? If so, it's a checkbox option. If you'd rather run Palo Alto Networks, more power to you. That's totally fine. And there again could be reasons. Yeah, it's not that the products are going to be, head-to-head checkbox exactly the same. But, sure. Again, these are all the trade-offs. You can go with a standalone product that's best in class, right? Or you can go with integration. Depending on what you need, it's, scale computing has always tried to be with HyperCore, the feature set that the fat part of the bell curve needs, right? You're in the 80% of the curve. These are the features you need. Great. Does it have every single thing that vCenter had or ESX had? No, it does not, right? And nor will it, right? It's sort of part of the simplicity of the platform. And I know you've played with it some yourself, but the simplicity of the platform comes from not overdoing it with some of those other things. It's it's almost do you want to a Mac runs Linux and you're on, a Unix version anyway, right? And I've got my, dev PC that runs Linux, right? They're completely different experiences, despite the fact that they're both the same effectively underlying operating system, right? The Mac is much more turnkey and locked down and, hard to break. Not hard to break my dev box. Right? That's not hard at all.
Right.
So that's kind of the experience there. So
does this mean that you'll be able to get some features like microsegmentation into HyperCore then with Acumera's networking integration like that, where you can build segmentation between virtual machines or zones inside of it? Is that on the?
Yeah, exactly. So and we had some of these features were already on the pre-existing HyperCore roadmap. Right. So we sort of jumpstart that. Others will obviously still take various levels of integration. We expect, though, that, the depth of the networking stack is significantly more now than it was previously. Right. And then, when you get into on the Reliant side, again, at sort of massive scale, you can imagine there's a lot of, what we jokingly always at the old scale called nerd knobs, right? Like you have to, there's so much you want to tweak right? It's almost the opposite. It's almost the Linux box version of what I just said, right? You have the
Right.
the Mac versus the Linux PC. You depending on the use case, you need one or the other.
I remember coming away being very impressed with the intentional simplicity that you built into it, right? Because really, when you're running a business like that, when you're, from an infrastructure side, when you're just trying to make sure that things are up, that you can, your platforms that you're providing to your downstream customers, whether they're employees or whoever, you don't really need to have a bunch of excessive of configurations, especially if the system is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you in the background, which is what HyperCore's big value is with its automation, right? It detects things failing, takes care of it for you. You don't do a single thing.
That's exactly right. And it can be a little bit, I don't know if off-putting is the right word. It can take a little bit getting used to, right? Like it's just, maybe like if you've ever ridden a Segway, right? Like the first time you get on it, you're like, what? And then, I don't know, a few minutes into it, it's no problem. Then it's like old hat, like it's no problem. And it's kind of like that. Like you're expecting there to be a lot more things you need to configure, a lot more things you need to set up. And it just sort of works, right? Like you can go, I know when you had played with it, you were setting up for the first time, but like if I were to take, I have a little, Intel NUC sitting here. If I were to take this NUC as a fresh install, I could install it and be deploying VMs in probably less than 5 minutes, and have them in production with all the storage configured and everything, right? Everything ready to go. Now, you make some trade-offs to make that happen. As you were pointing out, you don't have every little nerd knob, as we said, that you can do, but, does it have most of what you need? Probably so, right? It's got live migration, it's got backup, it's got disaster recovery, it's got the high availability, it fixes its own problems. That kind of stuff is all built in. One of the things that did happen since the last time we spoke is that we are now officially supported hypervisor of Veeam.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw that.
That's a big deal.
Fantastic.
Right?
It is a huge deal.
Again, for our mid-size customer, like Veeam is the dominant VMware, backup. And so, and not only now is Veeam supported, so you get all of everything you'd want from Veeam, right? We're no different than ESX at this stage, but migrating from VMware to Scale is literally take your VMware backup and restore it to Scale. Done.
Right.
You're up and running. Yeah. Right. Now that's not a live migration, right? You need a maintenance window to do that, but probably 95% of your VMs can take a small maintenance window, maybe 100%. Right. And if they need to be live migrated, we have tools to do that as well. But, just being able to say, hey, here's my entire environment. It's a holiday weekend. We're just going to let her rip and restore it over to the HyperCore platform. I mean, it's literally turnkey easy. So that's the fit, right? And again, if you're that environment that you just have to be able to tweak every little thing or optimize every little thing because that's the world you're in, there's other products besides us that can do that. If you just want it to work, that's what we do. So,
yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Veeam thing. I should have made mention of that. I can't tell you how many people that I have. I mean, it's changed in a year. In what feels like a lifetime, we've seen a massive adoption by Veeam of a bunch of different hypervisors and different platforms. Which, of course, they were like the 800-pound gorilla in the virtualization backup world, right? And then when they saw VMware and the writing on the wall, they had to move. And I'm so thankful that you took the time to work with them to get native, full, complete support for Veeam, because I tell everybody, it's the long tent in the pole. Most organizations looking to migrate or move from one hypervisor to another aren't looking at what hypervisor A can do in terms of migration from hypervisor B. They're looking at what backup systems does it support, and is it the one that I've spent the past decade using, and I have all of this backup that I have to deal with. So that's awesome, Jeff. That's really fantastic news.
Yeah, and I will also say, I mean, the Veeam team is fantastic. I love those guys. Like, I mean, they're just they're as genuine and interested in the types of customers that I was talking about as I am. And so it's no surprise, right? If people listening here, right? I mean, if you're a Veeam customer and you feel like you don't want to switch from Veeam, I can tell you why, because they care, right? Like they do care about that segment and it comes through. So they've just been absolutely, fabulous to work with. And one of the biggest challenges of the whole move away from VMware is the entire ecosystem of stuff that goes with it. I mean, the hypervisor is one thing, right? But, what about backup and disaster recovery? And, I was running virtual desktops and I was doing all these things. And, we had backup options for a long time, but we didn't have Veeam. And, this is a pretty big checkbox. So yeah, if you need Veeam, if you need virtual desktops, we've got that. We've got the networking stuff now. You've got that. So it's, again, it's not every single feature that you're going to find in VMware, but probably we've got most of what you were using, if not everything. So
that's awesome. So can you give me a kind of a TLDR on what's changed with HyperCore since we talked in July 2024? Has there been what new features, new functionality? And this is kind of off the cuff, but I'm kind of dying to know what's changed in the platform since then.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the big headline things are stuff we've talked about, and we have this integration with the AccuVigil stuff. We've got the Veeam support. The big thing though is it's a feature set we developed for edge computing, although it's proven to be useful across the board, right? So we had a part of the product which is called Fleet Manager, which is effectively an online portal through which you can manage your entire environment. Whether you have a single server deployed in one location or you've got 10,000 servers and 1,000 locations, doesn't matter, right? You can log in, you can do everything. You can see, you can monitor the systems, of course, see the health, but you can deploy virtual machines, move them around, do everything that you would do locally, but you can do from this cloud-based portal. And again, that it seemed like, well, we needed that if you had 1,000 locations, but it turns out everybody likes doing it that way, right? Because you're on the road, you're at the hotel, you need to get in the system. Oh, the VPN's all jacked up because it's always jacked up and all that kind of forget that, right? Now you just literally go into this portal. And so what we've done is we've extended that to do two different things. One is a feature set that we call zero touch provisioning, which means before you ever even try to install a system, you can pre-configure everything through this portal. So you can go into the portal and say, okay, I'm going to stand up a HyperCore cluster. Here's my basic configuration. Here's my networking config, my storage config, IP addresses, all that kind of stuff. And then all you have to do is when you turn on your HyperCore system, it'll automatically reach out to that portal, match the serial numbers and all that kind of stuff, license keys, and then just set itself up. And so you don't have to do anything. So this also means you can trust maybe even more junior people on your team to set stuff up because you've already done the hard work ahead of time. So that was pretty popular. Now, if you were only going to stand up one site, 6 of one, half a dozen of another, it doesn't matter where you type the IP addresses in, it's going to go somewhere. But if you were going to stand up a couple of sites, this was useful. We're extending that now to application deployment. So you can actually go into there and say, okay, I want to deploy this this version of Windows and this Windows app, right? So you in that case, I need to create a VM with Windows on it, have it installed, but then I actually want to reach through the VM and install an underlying application or applications. And you can configure all that through Fleet Manager. And so, that originally, like I said, was thought to be like, okay, I need to deploy 1,000 sites. That's an easy way to do it. Turns out, again, everybody's like, in one site, 2 sites, I'm a school district, I've got 4 schools. It's just pretty handy. And so, just to make it's a web thing. I mean, it's a portal. What's a portal? Portal's a web page, right? It's a web page where I can say, here's my configuration, here's my applications, go. And it just sort of all magically propagates down. So it's a pretty cool feature set. We keep adding to that. There'll be more coming out even later this year around it. Again, it's all ease of use focused, right?
Right.
You know, for most customers, it's like, hey, I've got 10 applications I'm going to, set up and run. And, where we're taking that is into, the classic app store sort of thing, right? So even now, the AccuVigil firewall, you want that? Great. Click a button. It'll download, install. It knows its configuration. It's like, it's like buying something on AWS Marketplace or buying something on your iPhone, right? It's the same kind of thing. So.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Yeah, it sounds like you really have kind of doubled down on the infrastructure as code kind of approach to making that a lot easier for automate the whole deployments. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah. I mean, the back end, and you could even still, through our APIs, we have, we have Ansible integration on the APIs and Terraform. So if you've already embraced the infrastructure as code kind of thing, you can do all that, via API. What we found and where this feature really started to have widespread interest from the mid-market is people wanted to do infrastructure as code, but maybe hadn't done it. So they don't have expertise in one of the other APIs, or, it's a little more technical to use. I'm sure you can do them and anybody can do them, right? But it's just a little bit more technical, where here it's like, okay, well, much like we do with other things in scale, we just fold it into the UI. And so, on the back end, we're using the APIs and we're doing Ansible and Terraform and stuff. But, all you have to say is, I want this application at these sites or on this node or whatever, and it goes. So
I'm going to ask you one more question. And that is the same question I think I left you with a year ago. And that is, when or where is our home lab version of HyperCore? When is it still on the roadmap? Something we can see? Is that a possibility, especially now after the acquisition?
Yeah. So this is one of those things that a thing like an acquisition does slow down a little bit. But one thing that did happen is that for partners, for technology partners, resellers, etc., that is available. So if you're a MSP or a VAR and you sign up to be a reseller of scale, when you go into the portal, there's a downloadable non-production use version, which is effectively the home lab version. We do make that available to individuals, as you know, right? But we make it available to individuals on a one-off basis. But we are building out now a much more robust user community, such that we can provide support for a true home lab kind of version. And I'm actually excited about it because, as the chief marketing officer, that's my project. So I'm very passionate about making sure that happens. So the home lab version obviously is going to be community driven, community supported. But that is coming. But if you're on the reseller side, or you're just very interested and would love to dive in, you can contact us. If you're on the reseller side, you just have to sign up and you'll be able to grab it. So
that's good. I can't leave you without putting on my complaining hat and be like, this is how you get new blood into the platform. This is how you get people to be excited about it. It doesn't have to be I talked to another gentleman a while back. It doesn't need to be a stack. It doesn't have to be a cluster. It can just be a single host to start, right? And just get people's hands on there. Make it a community supported thing via your community that you're building, which is great, by the way, that you're actually doing that. It's also hugely important that you have a place for people to go and interact with the people who are using it, right? Because it's I think smaller companies like Scale, where you are growing, but there's not a formed community of where people who are using this day to day can go and talk to others who are. That community makes a huge difference.
That's right. And I'm really trying, and again, it's one of my personal projects. I take this idea of, we want to be the good version of VMware, right? I take that very seriously, and community is part of that, right? We didn't talk about it here, but the whole VMUG kind of thing,
right,
all has gone away, right?
Yeah.
And I want trying to bring that kind of thing back. In fact, our annual conference, which is called Platform, is it's the intent is that becomes the next VMworld, right? But by that I mean, I don't just mean it could be big, right? I mean that it's more than a scale computing conference, right? Of course, we're putting it on and there's going to be scale computing content, but I want it to be sort of a general purpose IT community conference. So we have, when we have different tracks, there's an entire track which has nothing to do with scale, right? You want to learn networking, storage, compute, whatever it may, security, right? There's all those kind of different talk tracks where, other people, scale users, non-scale users, present those sessions, kind of like, the glory days of VMworld.
Right.
And so that's, that's in the spring, in Las Vegas. We would expect that this year we'll have, well over 1,000 people, maybe close to 2,000 people in attendance. It grows, it grows 30 or 40% every year. And, from what I understand, we're going to be approaching the size of the last VMworld now. So VMworld shrinking and we're growing. So so we're getting pretty good. But again, the idea is, that's part of community, right? It's getting the users together, the technology partners we have together, the ecosystem. The trade show floor isn't just about having a trade show. It's like, no, these are all the, you're going to be exposed to different tools and things that you need and integrations and be able to, and be able to talk to other users. I mean, one of my favorite things that happened last year is we did, we have training sessions available, basic training, advanced training on the product. And we had a panel of engineers, and you could just ask engineers whatever you wanted, right? And so, we had users and partners of all different levels of knowledge of scale. And what ended up happening is people would ask questions, and my engineers didn't even need to answer them. Somebody else in the audience would answer the question, right? And then it was just the audience is just going, right? Everybody's just going and answering these questions. It was great, and that's the kind of thing I'm looking to capture. Right, is to be able to do that kind of thing, and I said ultimately have sort of those local user groups and that kind of stuff. And that's again that now when you think about the home lab version, right, that's where it's sort of the glue that kind of brings everything together. So if you're because even if you're right, if you were a home lab, if you were an ESXi free user, right, you still might find it valuable to go to VMworld. Right. And do different things, just be, totally fine. And that's what we're trying to get. And that it's a tall order, to be able to pull that off. But I can feel the vacuum that's been left by VMware when that went away. Right. Yeah. This is to your point. Like that was a forum in its glory days where you would go to that show and felt like you were among peers who could help you solve problems. And it's very much like we talked about. Oh, you could meet that VMware engineer who worked your account, probably also there. You could meet partners who could do that, and now that's all gone. And so that's where we're trying to capture some of that.
Well, you're speaking my language because community is the thing that I think is. I think you even used the term word glue, but it's kind of the thing that helps a piece of software or a company or a platform become more than just a product amongst many, right? It's your assessment of I did not go to VMworld this year, but I saw, like you did, probably a ton of the coverage and the emptiness. And you're right, that's all lost. That was not just. There's nothing out there now like that was, and so hearing that that's a focus and a dream of yours is great because we don't have it anymore. On the security side, you have Black Hat. It's basically vendor neutral, and it's this massive thing. On the the virtualization or just whether it's just virtualization or virtualization of containers or whatever the scope is, right? That it doesn't exist as this big coming together. So that's. I want that. So please make that happen. I know it'll take a long time, but please make it.
Yeah. No, it builds up over time, but it is an objective, and you won't get there if you don't try, right? So that's really what we're trying to do. And I just, I love that community aspect, right? I mean, I love like interacting with people and having, again, seeing people solve problems. There was a, even on kind of the IT admin side, there was a time where Spice World was by Spiceworks was an event, and a lot of guys went to that show and did that kind of thing. But then after they were acquired, it kind of took on a different tone, and now it's not the same thing, right? So again, I just think it needs to be done, and going to an AWS conference or something is just not the same kind of thing, right? So this would be much more. Much more of a good fit, hopefully. So,
yeah. Well, I look forward to that. I think we'll probably call it there, Jeff, because you've been very generous with your time. I foresee us doing this in a year because I feel like something's going to happen again, and we're going to have an opportunity to talk again. So, Jeff Reddy, Scale Computing, the new Scale Computing. Thank you so much, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Thanks, Rich. Always a pleasure.
A very special thank you to Jeff Reddy for hanging out and spending the time to talk with me. If you enjoy this content and you find it valuable, get down in the comments, let me know what you think, and make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on the next video.